We're live! Greetings from Wellsville, Utah, USA. I'm John Poppleton. Welcome to my blacklight studio. Today we have Heather and Jen with us as our canvas, and they'll also be monitoring some of the feed and the questions, so keep them coming. I'll try and answer them as best as I can. As always, we're running a little bit behind, had a few technical difficulties, but each time it gets a little better. I think we've got the stream problems worked out for the most part. Today we were having issues with the laptop and getting the stream key into the system, but I think we're finally up and rolling. So, as you know, today we're going to be working on nebulas, and with nebulas there's so many options, and it's nice because you're not limited to one specific pose once it's painted. If you do kind of a full body nebula painting, you're able to change the pose. You don't have to worry about horizons getting out of whack or different shapes getting stretched funny. It's more versatile. There's also just endless possibilities, and so this is just going to be one variation. It's kind of a happy accident type scenario where you just play around, go back and forth between different colors and your lights and your darks, and until something starts to develop and you see where it's going, and you can just start refining it from there. But to keep this as short as possible, I'm going to try and move quick. I'm a perfectionist, usually put way too many details in, but I'm going to try and keep the pace going. So let's see, to get started here, I'm going to start with, I wanted to, for anybody that hasn't watched any of my previous work that's joining new, that has questions, some of the technical things about equipment and the lighting, the paint, I use is it even in my shot? Let me drag one over. I use the 4-foot fluorescent blacklight tubes rather than the LEDs. These are just 3 basic, cheapest Home Depot shop lights, fluorescent fixtures that I've mounted together to create this panel of lights. And then it's got 6 tubes. You don't need that many. In fact, I think just 2 tubes on either side is probably ideal. I just created these because I was having a lot of camera crews coming in and they needed more light for their camera equipment. Okay, so the reason I use those over LEDs is the wavelength. The ideal wavelength for your blacklight photography is going to be 365 nanometers, and that's in the invisible spectrum. The problem with the LED lights is a lot of them start above 400, which is your visible light, so you get a real purple skin tone. And if you're going for purple, that's great, but for my work I want it to be color accurate for the type of scenes that I'm painting, and so I choose to go with the old-fashioned, out-of-date, and being phased out fluorescent tubes. You can still get those on Amazon, and it's probably more of an issue finding the fixtures to put them in, but they still carry like a shop light fixture at Home Depot and Lowe's and those kind of places, but most of it is switching over to LED, so grab them while you can. Second, paint. I use a lot of different paint brands. I like different qualities about every single one of them, and so I kind of mix and match and blend them together and create my own using little bottles from the craft store. I can blend different colors and create new ones. But the 4 main brands that I use most often would be Glowmania USA out of Salt Lake. I really like their invisible blue. That's one of my favorite blues. And if I really want a really nice, rich, true red, I usually use their invisible red. I use something called Neon Glow that you can get on Amazon. It's really thick, and I water it down quite a bit for the airbrush, so you can either brush it on thick or you can thin it out with water, use it in the airbrush. It's pretty durable. We've got Chameleon. It's a pretty well-known body painting brand. And then excuse me, Pro Air. And it's a alcohol based rather than water, so that makes it waterproof and more durable, and it's also thinner, works really well with your fine detailed stencils, and you don't have to use as much air pressure. So I kind of use a combination of all four of those, and then there's a few other things that aren't even body paints. My favorite white in the world is Wildfire Invisible Clear White, which is really brittle. So you want, I mean, if you painted it on, it would just crack up. I usually just use that for my stars because it's just going to be a bunch of little specks, and I just love it for that. Other than that, you know, you just kind of play around. I started out with just washable craft paint from the store, or Hobby Lobby, and Halloween hairspray. That's all I started out with because I didn't know I was going to become a body painter. So, okay, Heather's got this tattoo that we're going to try and cover up, and where this is going to be a space scene, we kind of want the skin to be a little darker, and instead of using black, we're going to use gray, because gray, even though it'll look black on the camera, the paint on top of it is going to still stay bright, where if I painted on top of black, it would really mute the brightness. And I usually use a larger spray gun for this step, but I discovered last night that the hose that had been attached to it, somebody had tripped on it and broke it off, and so now I've got to order a new hose. So I'm going to turn off my light for a second here. All right, and do we have anything coming in yet?
Yeah, actually. Andrew Martin said, "Good evening, John." And we have a friend joining us from Japan and one from France. And they actually saw you at on a Japanese TV show.
Awesome. Thanks for joining. Good to have all of you. And switching over to, we got to get this show on the road so everybody over in Europe and that side of the world can get to bed at a decent hour here. This is going to go quite a bit slower with this airbrush. Compared to that big spray gun. Let me try cranking up the air pressure here. I had a lot of fun doing that Japanese TV show. I'm still trying to get a copy of it that I can share with everybody on Facebook and YouTube. I had a friend that saw it live in Japan and somehow was able to grab it for me just so I was able to see it.
Looks like Tony from Colorado is joining us as well.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Tony. We're doing
thank you for the shout out.
We're doing this nebula just for Tony. He's interested in learning how to do that. As soon as this pandemic's over, he's going to come over for a private lesson. Didn't realize it was going to be this hard to get the paint out of here. I should have just temporarily hooked up the spray gun to one of these hoses. All right, maybe we won't worry about it too much. Oh wait, it's starting to get a little better. So depending on your model skin type, some models have really dark skin, and you don't need to do a lot of darkening, and you can just use the skin tone as black. If it's a fair skin type, it's going to glow a little bit more. And if you use bright enough paint and compensate for the brightness of the paint, then the skin will still go dark. But where this is a space scene, we really want some dark areas, the deepness of space.
Andrew said his internet on the boat has been upgraded, so he's getting a much better connection.
Oh,
and there's
awesome.
no lag.
And is our stream smooth? It looks like it is for once. So I've upgraded our internet so we could stream at a full speed without it being choppy. And I think we're just barely on the edge of the speed it really needs to be. We're kind of out in the boonies, and so they don't put a lot of attention into the speed where we're at. If we were just 8 miles over in the main part of town, then we'd have more than enough. So this gray paint, I use it a lot for covering up tan lines and tattoos and blemishes, anything that is going to show through the paint. And even though it looks dark, it's the closest thing to the actual skin once the paint is applied to it. If I want a spot to be really bright and intense, I might put down just straight white. Not a UV white, but just a regular non-glowing white, just so it reflects more of the reacting UV paint. In certain situations I'll use black, but I usually use just standard non-UV gray. Let's see, the brand would be Mayron. It was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't form the word. Oh, any questions for our models while I'm doing this?
That can get scary.
This is going to get kind of old here. I'm not worried about the texture of it too much, because we're going to put such a weird random thing on top of it. It doesn't have to be completely solid and smooth. Just kind of want to mute the skin down. Maybe I can disguise this here. I would switch to the close-up, but it's just going to be dark until I start putting the glowing paint on there.
I have a question for our viewers. Am I allowed to do that?
Sure.
I'm just curious if any of you are doing this, like doing this painting at the same time, or if you all just watch this to get ideas and then try it out later. It's probably going to be a minute before anyone responds.
Okay, while we're waiting on that, I'm going to get some red started here. It's kind of a gradual process. You just want to put a little on it first and start to build it up gradually and see where it's going to go before you commit to a lot of color in one specific spot. With nebulas, some of the colors that work really well together are your reds and your blues. And where they overlap, it's going to create kind of a pink. Also, green and orange work really well. Today we're going to go more of the red and blues.
Looks like Tony said he's learning it to try it out later. Tony, you should definitely send a shot of what you end up with to John so he can forward it to me. I'm interested to see how it turns out. Oh, he switched it to my face.
Alrighty. Okay, I'm just gonna, what I'm thinking is I'll probably have more of the red on Heather on the left side and kind of have more of the blues over here on Jen on the right. And I didn't have time to get this dialed in before we started, but what I'm hoping is to have a backlight kind of peeking through and creating a little bit of a bright spot there in the nebula, like it's a big star in the background. We'll work on that when we come to the picture taking part. So for now I'm just going to kind of dust in some red here and there. And
Andrew said, unfortunately, it's not that easy to set up on a boat. One of the downsides of living on a boat.
And I'm hoping sometime in the near future I get to check out that boat. Okay, here we go, a little red. And it's going to be hard to see at first.
Andrew said he's looking forward to seeing you, John. Oh, and we are always, the models are always welcome as well.
It's been 4 years now since I was able to visit the Netherlands. Okay, I'm just going to let that sit for a minute. Like I said, don't want to do too much all at once. I'm going to switch over to the blue. Now the blue, I've got 3 different blues that I like. So most of the time it's going to be wasted just switching colors. But I'm going to start out with the invisible blue. Just add a little bit.
Oh, but Andrew's now in the sunnier climates in the southwest of France. Ooh. La la.
Okay, we've run out of that. Now I'm going to switch over to the Neon Glow blue.
Quick question, John.
Okay.
Do you save the lives that you do on your YouTube account?
Not sure I follow the question.
Are you going to be uploading this later?
Oh, okay. So it's being recorded on YouTube for future playback. And we've been trying to record it locally here so we can edit it, but we were having trouble with the hard drive feature and the switcher connecting. So we're just letting YouTube record it, and hopefully it'll be better than the first two, which I'm thinking about deleting just because they're so terrible and they've had so many views. I feel like it's making me look like I don't know what I'm doing, but then I don't. I'm just kind of faking it, but well, that went through pretty fast.
So I have a question for you, John. How important is it for the model to start out in the position that you want them to end up in?
Well,
and at what point is it that they absolutely need to be in that position?
It depends on what you're trying to paint. So if you're going to paint anything with the horizon, you need to be in that position when you're painting anything around that horizon line. If you're going to do a tree and you want the tree to be straight, you're going to have the arms up. Here, let me turn my light on. You're going to have the arms in position because it stretches the back skin, and so they're going to have to hold that. Anything that's critical as far as vertical, horizontal lines, circles, if you're doing like a moon or a planet, you don't want that to turn into an egg shape. Other than that, the model can, for like a nebula, for example, they could be in a lot of different positions and it wouldn't matter too much unless you're adding any specific element like a planet or some kind of a specific shape that's going to get distorted when they change their position. So in those cases, like if I'm painting a tree, I'll have them put their arms in the position and I'll paint the tree outline or the basic trunk so I know where it's at. Then they can put their arms down and relax while I fill it in and work on the branches and leaves, things like that. Okay, adding a little more of our Neon Glow blue. Now the thing to remember with some of these, especially blues, is they change when they dry. So sometimes they get brighter, sometimes they get darker, and you have to know what to expect so that you don't put it on wet and overdo it and then have it change when it dries and ruin everything. So I kind of want our main bright focus right in here, and then it's going to kind of fade out on the sides. So I'm going to add more of the brightness here in the middle. And that camera, which I haven't started using yet, timed out. We can just leave it for now, and then when we start getting enough to go to the close-up, we can wake it up again. All right. Okay, I'm going to set that aside for a minute.
Would you like us to be further apart, John? So we should be the back of our arm? Or is it fine if we overlap?
So sometimes you have to be careful because the lights are out to the side and you'll get a little bit of a shadow in the middle where the black light's not reaching. And I can probably pull this over here and get into the middle better. All right. Okay, back to our red. Oh, continuing with equipment. I've got about 5 different Iwata airbrushes, 3 different models from the Revolution up to the Pros, and you don't have to have fancy equipment. My first, well, like I said, I started out with just Halloween hairspray, and then I bought a $10 airbrush from Harbor Freight. They don't carry it anymore, but the exact same one's available on Amazon, and has little changeable cups that you can put 5 different colors, you know, one in each cup, and then quick change it, which is nice because you don't have to clean it in between. And I still really love that airbrush. The problem is I've gotten lazy to the point that I have this big bucket full of all of the little cups that need to be cleaned, and they've been sitting in the bathroom for a year waiting for me to do that, and I've just been so busy that I haven't taken the time to do it. Otherwise, I love that airbrush still and use it in my workshops. But if you have the means or already have the fancier airbrushes, that's great. This is the paint gun that I usually use for the large areas, which I wish I had taken the time to just hook up with one of these hoses temporarily to cover large areas fast. This was with a coupon, $13 at Harbor Freight, and I really love it. Okay. Camera equipment. The only thing that you really need is a camera that you can set manual settings, your exposure and white balance, and that's about all you need for camera equipment. If it can work well in low light, that's even better because this is pretty dark, but it's not 100% mandatory. As long as you can set the exposures manually to make up for it and the model can hold still. Starting to run out here. I have to add some more. So on a side note, I've been working at UPS now, part-time in the evening, for a little over a year now, and I'm to the point where I'm super tired of that. And tired of this pandemic. But pandemic or not, as soon as this year is out, I'm going back to being a full-time artist. And so I'll have a lot more time and energy to be working on some of these projects. Lately, I've just been so wiped out after work. I mean, I figured I'd have plenty of time to work on everything because I was only working a few hours in the evening, not realizing it was going to be such a physically brutal experience that I wouldn't have any energy on my off time to do anything I wanted. So as soon as we get through this next holiday season, which is the peak season, if I survive, I'm going to be going back to full-time photography and painting. So I'm in the process of reinventing my portrait studio that I've kind of let go by the wayside for the last 10 years. And going to be coming up with a whole bunch of new things. So stay tuned. Yeah, our models are still pretty bright. We've got to figure out a way to get them a lot darker. And
Andrew says that's good news.
It's taken a year at UPS to make me appreciate what I had going before. I get kind of burned out, tired of doing the same old thing all the time. It takes something to reset my desire. All right, I'm gonna step over to my cabinet here. Let's let's put the spotlight on Heather. And she can entertain us for a second.
Oh my goodness.
I'm going to go see if I can find a new paint gun that doesn't need to be cleaned.
Wish I had some good jokes, man.
Okay, this might be extreme.
I guess I can all tell you the story of how I met Poppleton.
Go for it.
Yeah. He used to do fantasy fairy portraits. Well, I guess before that, you were doing runway shows and catalog photography. So I met him through that when I was doing some runway shows, and then I guess he figured I was elfish looking. So he decided to turn me into one of his fairies. Then you just kind of evolved with your art since then. I feel like every 5 years you go through a different change. Don't you think?
The black light's probably been the thing that I've stuck with the longest.
Yeah, I guess it's been 10 years.
But sometimes even that starts to feel kind of monotonous.
His fairy portraits were pretty cool, though.
And I'm thinking about going back to some of the fairy stuff. The problem was I wanted to work with older subjects, and I did all of my practice stuff on adult aged ladies, but then all the clients that wanted to actually hire me were all, they wanted their 6-month-old baby turned into a fairy, and then the baby's sitting there in the woods crying and miserable, and that's no fun. Okay, so let's see. I've got out my giant paint sprayer here just so we can try and get this done quick, and I'm hoping it doesn't just fog up the whole studio with mist, but I'm even going to just bypass some of the process and go straight to black.
Let me get in a better position. My leg was falling asleep. Because I'm old. Okay.
All right. Here goes nothing here.
Oh, Andrew said he's looking forward to seeing some of the life casts that you were talking about.
Oh, yes. I've got a couple new ones that I'm working on, and I'm still working on on the other one and about ready to get it finished up here.
Do you want these down further, or are they all right?
Well, let's see.
Or is that going to mess up your lines anyway?
We can pretty much start over, or...
Nope, we can leave them if you want.
It's easier with them off, but but at this point, I don't know.
Okay, we'll just...
I guess for demonstration purposes, it's not super critical. But, all right.
So, John, do you think you would incorporate any of your fairy stuff into the blacklight if you went back to the fairy?
Possibly. I've done a couple blacklight fairies with glowing wings, but I really like the wood fairies. Time for some more. I'm going to try and hide the underwear a little bit here. And by the way, this bigger airbrush was only $10 at Harbor Freight. So you definitely don't have to spend a lot on equipment. The most expensive thing would be your camera, followed by probably your lighting, which isn't that much. The tubes are about $12 a tube, so to get fully set up, it might cost $100 for your lights. All right, I'm going to start using some gray now.
Andrew would like to know, John, have you ever considered reproducing some of the Roger Dean illusions that were used for album covers?
Possibly. There's a whole list of things I want to start working on, and there just hasn't been enough time to try everything, and then I forget all the things that I'd planned on doing and get sidetracked easily, and I need to start writing down my ideas so I don't forget to go back to them. But there's a whole lot of things that I'm going to start doing that's new to me and that I haven't done in the past. All right, so pretty much I'm annihilating almost everything I've already done, but that's okay. It's a back and forth process. I should have just done this to begin with, but I didn't even think about getting this big spray gun out. All right. What a mess. Okay, let's get back to where we should have been. I'll have to clean that out later. Probably never happened. Disconnected the... crud, hang on. Disconnected the manifold by accident. All right. And that took so much air running that big spray gun that now I got to recharge the air compressor. So bear with me. It's going to be a little noisy for a moment. have to kind
You're
of
fine
keep
with
that
that?
same.
Okay.
Okay, while that's charging up, I'm just going to keep working. Get some of our red back in here. Okay, that might be good enough for now. I'm going to switch over to a little bit of orange to start brightening up the areas that are going to be brighter. The red's kind of a darker color, so I used it for the more subtle areas. And I'm starting to like this area right here. So I'll kind of give that some attention, and some of these other areas right in here where I know that the light's going to be coming through and we're going to have a little bit more of a highlight. And then finally we'll get to some stars. That kind of brings it all to life and helps you realize what you're actually looking at.
Looks like you've got a fan. Said stoked to be watching you from Vancouver. Been following your work for a while now. You're such an inspiration, John. Thanks for streaming this workshop. It's from Gabriel.
Ah, Gabriel, thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in. I hate being in front of the camera. I apologize. I'd rather be behind it for sure. Now this is mostly a red and blue type of a nebula, but I'm going to add some green because I think it really helps everything come together, having a little bit of green and some orange mixed here and there. Not too much though, just a little. And I'm thinking it'll be kind of right about in here. All right. Might add some more later. Now going back to our blue. And it looks like we're out. So now I'm going to go to our the chameleon UV blue. Each one of these has its own kind of unique qualities and blue. The only thing I don't like about doing nebulas is the uncertainty of where it's going to go before I'm done. And if I'm not trying to copy something that I'm looking at a picture of, I'm always wondering what it's going to look like because I just have no idea until it happens. And I need to start thinking about our really bright highlight and where it's going to go. And one of the things that I've done last night while I was watching TV and relaxing after work is I just took cardboard from different packaging and have ripped it into, various shapes that you kind of see these dark portions of nebulas that have these strange shapes. So and the highlights. So I'm going to use these to create some of those hard-edged, weird interstellar dust cloud, whatever they are, type things here. Kind of like the way that one's going, but okay, so I'm going to start mixing up the highlight, and for that I'm going to use white, but I want it to be quite a bit warmer, so I'm going to add some orange to it once I put it in the airbrush. And then I'll add orange to that. Might create kind of a salmon color. But turn out the light so I can see and check it here. Got a garbage can out of frame that I'm spraying into. Okay. All right. Decisions. Go ahead and put the arm connected. Let's see if we have a. Let's try right there. Don't know what's going to happen here. Might be a complete flop. All right. You can. Oh, you've woke up that camera. All right. Let's try a close-up shot here.
Archuleta family said this is so fantastic to see your brilliant mind at work.
Thank you, Tony. All right. So I'm spraying mostly on the actual cardboard and letting it spill off a little bit so I can get a pretty tight, glowy edge. Got a little bit overspray there, but not a problem. Like I said, it's there's lots of layers. We're gonna go back and forth quite a bit. I'll probably dust that a little bit here. And need to add a few more weird shapes here and there. All right, moving on. Got all kinds of craziness going on here now. Okay, so looking at this, I really like this section right here, and this this orange and the blue kind of and the green, kind of hard to see with that camera. If I get this light closer, it might stand out a little bit. Okay, this I probably made way too bright, but that's okay, we're building it up. So I'm going to kind of hit this a little bit more, start to brighten that up, and just keep layering it and building up our... That's the problem with nebulas. It can take a long time to build up all these layers. And for this live stream, I didn't want to have it drag out for 3 hours like the first one. So I'm just going to keep plugging away here. And I'm going to go back to our green.
Serena said, hello from South Africa.
Ooh,
Can't
hello.
believe I'm watching this. Such a fan of your work. Oh,
Thank you so much. I think you're probably the first South African viewer we've had that I can remember. It's amazing what technology allows us to do. Alright, going back to orange. Oh, guess this is blue. We need that too, so. And probably out of that one now. Okay, now back to orange. And I think I'm out of orange now. So I'm going to add a little yellow. I kind of keep my, I've got 5 of these airbrushes, which isn't enough to keep every color in, so I kind of keep one airbrush for all the warm colors, one for all the cool colors, one for the weird color, one for the highlights, one for the shadows. And I might have to go back and forth a little bit sometimes for special colors, but so I probably got this first bright spot here a little brighter than I intended. I always worry about things too much when I need to realize that by the time I'm done it's all going to work out, but sometimes it feels like it's a disaster. But I'm just going to tone it down a little bit with our gray just to knock some of that brightness off. And to fix this line where I oversprayed. My hose is getting caught. And like I said, it's just a lot of happy accidents. I'll just kind of hit the gray, which looks dark, in different places and create some of those interstellar dust cloud spots and see what textures start to form. And then I'll just kind of continue to build up the spots that I liked once I see a pattern. Good news is there's no right or wrong. Nature is so crazy. The only thing is if you take a picture of something, nobody can dispute it, how weird it is, because you have an actual photo. If you paint a picture that's weird, then everyone just says you're a bad painter. But that was my problem when I started learning to paint trees, is I always overanalyzed every detail and felt like, oh, that tree just doesn't look natural. And then I see a photo of a tree that looks way crazier, but it's a photo, so it's believable. And so if you follow these different astrophotography type things, you'll see a lot of different variations of the same galaxy, same nebula. just because there's so many different ways to photograph it, and using different filters to bring out all of those different invisible wavelengths. And so one photographer might use more hydrogen alpha in the exposure, and another photographer might do it with more sulfur and all of these crazy things. So you get different colors and variations of the exact same. So it's just kind of a fun see what happens. Don't know till it happens kind of a thing. Starting to come together. I'm going to put the gray back, and I want to go, I think, back to our warmer colors. We need a lot more. I've got yellow in there at the moment. I really need the red, I think, but what I want to do is I've got these bright spots starting to form in some of these places, these yellows, and that could be from a star or something back there. So I'm going to hit it a little bit more, emphasize it, brighten it. We just say there's a sun right here, creating all that. Let's try see what the close-up looks like. So I'm just going to give it just a blast of yellow right there to show where all that glow is coming from. Same thing right up in this spot. Let's do it again. And then we've got one right up here. Try not to get my hand in the shot or blocking the...
Tony just asked what Heather and Jen are using to keep their hair up from falling down. We actually just have the long clips. I can show it to you. Then that way, if the model has their hair, no, can you see it? They have their hair curled, it's less likely to ruin it with like a hair tie. And it'll keep those curls more natural.
Okay, I guess it could be worse.
Just happy mistakes.
It's really going to look good once we get the stars on. I know that much. I just need to kind of start blending some of this a little bit where I made it a little bit too bright. I figured that would probably happen, but okay, I just need to get all this yellow out. I hate wasting paint. I want to go back to red, but I don't want to use or throw away the yellow. So I'm just looking for areas where I might be able to do something with it. Like I said, orange, yellow's close to orange, mixed with green usually looks really good. So I'm just going to give it a little zap over here. In a few spots. Give it some wispies. Add a little more glow around this big one down here. Maybe right there. All right, good enough. I'll just ditch what's left. Just add a few drops of our red. So there's different types of airbrushes. If you haven't used an airbrush before, you've got gravity feed, which sucks the paint up from the bottom. This is No, wait. Sorry, I always get this mixed up. Siphon feed siphons the paint from the bottom, little cup on the bottom of the brush, up. Gravity feed is what this is, where it has a cup on top and gravity allows the paint to come down. And where I'm going back and forth so often, and I'm using small amounts, I like just the little cup on top so that I can just add a couple of drops. Where if you're going to be doing large areas, siphon feed might be better because you can pop on a big, full bottle. I mean, you can even get attachments that'll fit on your actual paint bottle, so you can just hook the whole bottle on. And if you're going to do a large area, that's great. But if you're constantly going back and forth between colors, you're going to waste a lot of paint. So if you're just doing small areas, I find myself with this type of paint, it doesn't take a lot in some situations to get it to where I want it, and I don't want to waste a lot of paint, so I'll just add a few drops into a gravity feed, and then I can change over to another color quickly without wasting a lot. The siphon feed, it'll fill up the little tube that you connect the bottle with, and then you got to flush all that out, even if you're just using a little. So this is red. If I brighten this up, it's going to take away some of that bright, that white edge that I put on there. It's not going to seem as bright because now the thing next to it is also bright. Let's go in close here. Okay, so I could have used a few more drops, but you never know. It's easier to add, keep adding more than to wash it out. So I really like to just kind of lightly dust the scene until I get a feel for it, and then I can go in and really hit the more bold colors in the spots that I like, instead of throwing a whole bunch of paint on and then deciding I didn't like it. So it's just a lot of slowly layering it up. Going back to some orange now. I have a hard time seeing with that spotlight shining in my eye. Let's take a break on the warm. Throw a little more blue in. I think we ran out last time. And I think the blue that I want now is probably back to the Glowmania USA Invisible Blue. Just a little. and bring out some of this purpley cobalt. Where they overlap, like where the blue overlaps your orange and reds, you're going to get pinks and purples. Okay, better not go too far with that because I always tend to overdo it. Oh, a teeny bit more green. And what I'll do is I'll get closer each time, and as I get closer, it becomes more detailed and sharp rather than a soft. You get more of a texture. And I don't want to do that right off because I don't know where I'm going to end up yet. Don't know where the painting's headed until it reveals itself. Now, when you're doing UV body painting, one of the most important things is contrast. And I have a tendency to get carried away, throw a ton of paint on, get the scene too bright, and it kills the contrast. And so what we'll want to do here in a minute is start adding dark, really dark, contrasty areas in to make the highlights pop out more. And do a little bit over here. Okay. Okay, might actually might be hope for this. Now, one thing I want to talk about is one of the best ways to create your darker elements is to use a non-UV paint of the same color that you're working on top of. So if I want to add some darker details to my orange and reds, I would use a non-UV red, which is, all these are really hard to see in the dark. So I've had to label them because they all look black under the black light. The red glows barely, but compared to the other paint, it's basically dark. But it just gives you a little bit more, it's more subtle than using black for a dark area. It doesn't build up as fast, and so it's a little more forgiving. So if you're trying to do subtle little dark areas, you can do it without slipping on the trigger and ending up with a totally dark spot. I'm just emptying the remainder of the gray back into the bottle here. And while I still have some residue of the gray in the cup, I'm just going to use it to add a little more contrast in some spots here. I can probably define some of these a little bit. Let's try the close-up here. May or may not show up. Maybe I can get this light closer, make it a little brighter. The nice thing about using the gray is I can get the appearance of black, but if I want to paint on top of it, it'll just be like bare skin again. Now under visible light, it would look completely different. It just looked crazy. If you're doing this for a visible exhibit or photo, then you'd have to just paint it under visible light and go with the paint that looks right. But for what I do, my end goal is just to take a picture of it, and so I paint it in the lighting that I'm going to use to create that picture, and don't worry about what it looks like in visible light. We'll do a really crazy dark thing there. Didn't realize there was going to be that much paint stuck in there. It must have been really thick. Finally. Okay, so I'm going to add some red. Let me flush it just a little.
John, Gabrielle was wondering what type of non-UV paint do you like to use to create the darker areas?
Okay, so there's probably a lot of choices out there. I just grabbed what was most available on Amazon, and I'm not coming from a body painting background, so I don't have a lot of experience with body paints, and so I went with Mayron. And so I've got like the gray and the black. I've got, it's kind of like a Hulk green, and that's really dark in the black light. I'll use that for my forest scenes and adding shadow to trees and moss. And then of course just plain white and reds and blue and orange and yellow, and I just barely started experimenting with the oh, sorry, I'm still on the close-up cam. With the yellow, I mean, all of these are pretty dark, but like the yellow comes out more like a kind of a cyan or a burnt I can't keep track of all these. The siennas and your dark burn type brown rusty colors, even though it's a pretty yellow and invisible light in the black light on top of glowing yellow, it comes out really dark, but it's a subtle rather than just plain black. It stays within the family of the color that you're working in. So if you want to do a lot of detail and go all out, that's the way to do it. If it's not that important, then you can just use gray or black for everything. But I'm still just trying to figure out a way to master a photorealistic painting. Problem is when you're working with body painting and you have models that get tired and they move and sweat and all those kind of things, it's hard to put all the details you want to into it. You pretty much have a day, and for most of what I do, it's under 3 hours, where a lot of body painters might spend 14 for a really elaborate project. But if I used to have a big piece of foam core board that I can come back to every day and work on it a little bit at a time, you can really get some amazing detail with all of these different shades. So, okay, going back to our close-up now. And right here, I'm working with red, but you can see how dark that is. Only it's going to build up slower than a gray right next to it that has that really dark spot, so I can be more gradual as I build it up and add all these extra layers of texture. Will interact with other colors differently. So if you have a UV, the Oscar pink, and vice versa, and red and a UV blue mixed, and you get a now green would be so if you experiment, like I'm still with the red, but I'm putting it over blue, you get a completely different effect. For the most part, it's just playing around, seeing what happens, having fun by using the reds and the oranges and the yellow non-glowing paints on top of a glowing paint to create different variations. Well, just to speed this up, I'm going to go back to the gray and finish it up, and then we're going to add the stars. I lost the gray. I had a little bottle just for gray. I'll just go back to the big bottle.
we were having a few buffering issues on the tablet I'm watching, so I'm just curious if anyone at home is having those issues. Let me know.
Okay, good enough. Moving on to the stars. Now once we get the stars on, it will it'll also give us a little bit more direction as to where we can put the finishing final touches on it, which is some of the glow around the stars and any last minute details. So this is where I like to use the wildfire, and it's a pretty bright, pretty neutral white. It's the only true white that I've ever seen in UV. I just wish it was body paint. The chameleon works pretty good, but it has more of a blue cast, and it's kind of hard to tell on this because it's all going to overexpose and look white. But I really like this wildfire. It's made for like your Hollywood and theme park type attractions, stage sets and backgrounds where they might want to transition from a daytime scene to a nighttime scene without changing the background, just by changing the lights, and have suddenly all of these stars appear in the little village scene background on a stage. Then you just kick on the black lights and suddenly, you know, it's there. It's invisible under regular light. And then I don't even know what you call these kind of brushes, but it's kind of for that, where you have the stencil on your wall and you kind of pat at it. What do you call that? I don't know. Toll painting? I don't know. But it's a nylon bristle. They make natural bristle too, but that gets soggy and loses its spring, and I'm wanting to flick the paint, and I don't want it to change its springiness, so I use a artificial or a synthetic, I guess is the term. And I like to soak my brush in some water before I dip it in the paint, just so it releases a little easier. But you don't want this to have too much, so I squeeze it out, otherwise it's going to be too runny. The one thing you do not want is to have your stars run. I guess it could be a comet, but and then you got to be careful because you never know what the first flick is going to be like.
Hold up.
So maybe I'll go a little higher and just carefully to see how it's going to react. Now if you want bigger ones, the trick is to get back further and flick it harder. And only the heaviest paint droplets are going to reach the subject. And then if you want really fine ones, you get close and go gradual. We could probably go with a few more heavy ones. So I'll pick up the rest of the paint, back up a little. Oh, got a big one there. All right, cool. And then because this is a permanent paint, it will ruin whatever it sits on and dries. So I get the brush right back in the water on that. Now the body paint is great because I'm lazy or I'm busy. I just let it dry right on the brush. I don't care. I just get it wet again when I'm ready and it's back to the way it was before. Same with the airbrushes. I really should clean them out every time, but too much going on. I just leave it in the brush, maybe for a month if I'm not doing any body painting. Come back, get it wet, and I'm ready to go again. Very forgiving that way. But this wildfire paint, it's quick drying and it'll dry hard like glue. Okay, so now we've got some really nice bright stars here and there, and what I want to do is take some of those really bright ones and just give it a little extra. Oh, another thing I wanted to do, looking at some of the nebula pictures, is seeing some of the stars in different colors, and in like an area where it's warmer, there were more orangey type stars or red stars, and so I wanted to just add a little bit of a UV orange or green stars in a few spots, not a lot, just in a couple places, just to break it up a little bit. So same technique, just different color. But it's thicker, it behaves differently than the wildfire. So just in some of these areas where it's a little warmer, I'm gonna give it some warm. I'm gonna rinse that out. Do the same thing with some green.
Looks like a few people have experienced some buffering issues, but so far so good.
Yeah, our thing did say that there was a connection. I mean, it was just a little lower than it wanted to see it, just by a smidge, and it's, I think for the most part it's working, but occasionally it dips just a little bit too low.
Also, Tony says that this is looking amazing.
Oh, thank you, Tony. I feel like I can do a way better job when I'm not trying to do a live in front of the camera explaining it, where I can just focus on the painting. But you'll get the idea. Okay, so just a little green in there. It's coming together. Now, where I'm coming from a photography background, I know that a lot of the stuff is going to be adjustable later. I know I can boost contrast and adjust my brightness and all of those things to perfect it the way that I envision it. And so a big part of what I'm going to end up with as a result of the photography and the post-processing side of it rather than the painting. But it's nice to get it as close as you can to begin with. Now, we got to kind of decide on what color would be best for our glowing spots here, and I'm thinking this time maybe we'll try a blue. Another thing we can do is on our yellow sun star type things that we have here, we could also touch that with just a dot of pure paint to make it pop out a little bit more. Let's try that. I'm going to take the yellow. You could also do this with the white, but just to see what happens. I'm going to take the back of the paintbrush and dip it, and then just touch it to the center like that. And let's go in for the close-up here.
Looks like we're having issues with the card.
Oh, okay, I know what happened. The record button must have been pushed, and that card is really little. I just had it in there so it wouldn't say anything about no card. Okay, not a problem. Anyways, I'm just touching the center of these. If you want to go in and just format that card, then it'll be fine. There's nothing important on there. We've oh, by the way, I'd like to thank John, Jen's husband, for working our close-up cam and keeping it where the action is. Okay.
Serena said, such small details that make a huge difference. Thank you for sharing your secrets.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, just kind of creates an illusion in the end. If you look up close, it's just a big mess. But hopefully from a distance, it'll look good in the end once it's photographed. It'll look completely different in the camera. I mean, we're using a camera to create this signal, but I totally changed the settings when I take the picture.
John, would it be all right if I pivot my hip for a minute?
So there's our close-up again. And that camera's actually where it's set a little darker exposure. You can see the contrast a little bit better now in that camera. And I've just kind of been taking the wood and blunt end of the paintbrush and just putting a dot on these yellow spots here and there, just to give it a bright center. And you could even add some anywhere you want rather than flicking it, but I always overthink it when I'm trying to be random. Alright, so now we're just going to add that blue glow around some of our brightest stars. And for that particular blue, I got to decide which color I'd like, which brand is going to give the prettiest. Let's try the we'll keep it simple. We'll go with the neon glow. I just got to get this invisible blue out first. Oh, we need a little. This is the hard part. Aiming the airbrush and hitting the center of the star. Sometimes it's easier to put the glows in and then use the back of the brush to put the centers on afterwards, so you don't have to target it.
Switch to the close-up.
Okay. So let's try that one. I'll test it on my hand here. Okay. Another thing you can do, the way these airbrushes work, I'll hold it here. I don't know if you can see it very well, but when you push the button down, you're not getting paint. You're just getting air. You don't get paint until you pull the trigger back, and the more you pull it back, the more paint comes out. And you have to coordinate that. So one thing you can do to help aim is if you just give the air, it'll dimple the skin just enough that you can tell where the paint is going to hit it when you pull the trigger back. So I'm just going to start with the air, center the dimpling from that air stream, and then allow the paint to come out. Then I'm going to back the brush off to create a gradual fade up. You know, it's going to fade out as it gets bigger. I don't know, that's not super impressive. But we got to give it a minute because it changes when it dries. I'm going to use the air. I'm not going to paint. I'm just going to use the air from the airbrush to kind of blow on it and get it to dry a little quicker. Find out if it's even the effect I like. I might have wanted that chameleon blue instead. In fact, let's skip the blue altogether and let's just go to white. That's probably what we're wanting. I wonder what happened to that light.
Oh, it did go out, didn't it? I didn't even notice.
Wonder if it burned out. That's not good, because we're going to need it. See if I can do this left-handed. Got to stretch the cord way over here, or the hose.
Looks like camera 2 might be overheating if you want to switch it to camera 1 for a bit.
Alrighty. Okay. Yep. So camera one here, I've got it overexposing just a little bit, just so I don't disappear completely. But when I take the picture, this is going to be a lot darker. And then to keep the model from disappearing, I'll use some rim lighting on their bodies to keep them, their outline really visible. But I can make this darker and more contrasty, which will make those highlights stand out by themselves a little better, with a little hint of some of these softer tones here and there. Also in post, I'll be brightening and darkening to get the final effect. But it's looking pretty good. I think I could add just a couple more of these little highlights and call it good. Now, I don't know if anyone's interested in seeing the photography side of that. If you are, I can reset some of the cameras just a little bit so you can see what I'm doing and shoot the picture, or if that's not important, I can just post the picture later, which I'll do anyways. But if you have any technical questions, fire away. Did I miss anything? Just need a couple more over here. Been wanting to do some Star Wars themed things, but I've been afraid Disney's going to come after me if I...
Tony said he'd like to see the photography process if that's not too much trouble.
Alrighty. Okay. Kind of like.
Also, I have shifted a bit, so I will shift back.
Alright. Good enough. Put that away. Alright, see if I can do this with the mic clipped to me. One of these days I'll go wireless, then I can roam around freely. What I'm going to do is, I do have some LED lights that can give me lots of different colors, and that's cool. But trying to do it on the live thing, it's just one more thing to worry about and fiddle around with, and takes time. So for tonight or today, wherever you're whenever you're viewing, I'm going to go with what I created in the beginning and used for years, and that's just some fabric, white fabric glued to some foam core that reacts to the black light and puts off blue light, and I just position those on either side of the model, and that blue light will kind of wrap around their shape, and I'll put one above them. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to take the mic off so I can run over there without tripping on the cord.
Yeah, and Serena also said they would appreciate seeing the photography.
All right. just just a big piece of really thin craft board, foam core board from the hobby store. White fabric on it.
Mute.
I'm not worried about it getting in the shot because I can black that out later, as long as it's not intersecting the model's body. Oh, there it is. I lost the... I've got a thing that rolls on a track on the ceiling, and I'm going to hook this one too. And then hopefully we've got a light back here that I'm hoping didn't burn out. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm back on the mic. All right, the background light didn't burn out. It was just, the dimmer got turned down a little bit. So I have it on a dimmer so I can adjust the brightness. Right now we've got this camera where I need my other camera to be. So I'm going to try moving the camera further back so that you can see what I'm doing. Someday I'll have one more camera hooked up already in position so we don't have to switch them around. Okay, now that one. Thank you. All right. Generally, I'd be further away from the subjects, but then you wouldn't be able to see me in this camera. So. Once I get this dialed in, I'll hook the HDMI cable to the camera so you can see the camera's view.
Andrew Martin just said, John, thank you for sharing.
You're so welcome. It's probably getting late where you're at. Thanks for sticking with it. And we are almost done. If anybody's going to sign off early, just want to say have a happy Thanksgiving. Stay safe. And I couldn't think of a Thanksgiving theme to paint, so we went with the stars here.
And a big old turkey butt.
I haven't tried doing a turkey in blacklight yet, so I usually stick to doing silhouettes of animals. And a turkey silhouette just might have been funny. Okay, so I like using the live view on the camera so I can preview the exposure and the color. And I'm using manual focus because in the dark the camera doesn't work as well. And so I'll zoom in the live view mode so I can work on the critical focus. And it's nice having all those little stars because it's easy to tell when they're sharp. I'm using an ISO of 1600, generally around 7.1 on the aperture, and right now it's currently at a shutter speed of 1/20th, but that is probably the thing that I vary is the shutter speed. I'll do a little bracketing, a little brighter, a little darker, play with that a little bit. Right now we've just got to work on getting our pose lined up and getting our backlight coming through in just the right spot, and that's where it's going to get tricky. And I need to adjust our panel because it's in the camera. But let me hook up the feed to our camera. And it should be coming online here any second. There we go. All right. That's what the camera sees that we're taking the picture with. And I still have to dial in a few things like this. This light's going to be off. And this panel, I'm going to move back a little. And now we have to get this, this is the key element here, is getting our backlight to come through. The arm somewhere right in here. Oh. I apologize, folks. That camera's set to go to sleep after a couple minutes. Okay, should be coming back here. There it is. Okay.
Andrew said, hopefully I'll see you on the boat sometime soon. Please tell your models that if they are ever in France, they are most welcome to come for a cruise along the canal.
Thank you so much, Andy. I am hoping to be there. Maybe next year. Make that a goal. Okay. Just need to move a few of these little things here. Take the wrinkles out of our towel. And we're going to take a photo. And now the problem with this old camera is there's always a big delay after you take the picture. That's why I don't generally use it connected to a TV. But the next camera won't have that problem. I'm going to brighten, I'm going to turn up our dimmer. And that's going to put more yellow on the models. I'm also going to adjust the focus on the light to get a little bit broader. Okay, let's try that. 1, 2, 3. And then Heather, if you could set the tablet somewhere. There we go. And 1, 2, 3. Okay. Cool, we even got a little sunburst coming through. That's just what we wanted. Let's try another one. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm going to switch back to that view and disconnect this camera so I can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to get in as tight as I can without cutting anything off. I'm going to go in and put my own black margin all the way around in. Check my focus. Okay. Go ahead and extend your arm out again, Heather. And bring your elbow in closer to your body. Okay. Good. 1, 2, 3. We lost a little bit of the sun coming through the arm, so you need to go towards Jen a little. Right there. 1, 2, 3. Hold it. I'm going to alter the exposure a little bit. And go ahead and lean towards Jen a little more. Close the gap a little bit. Right in there almost. A little tighter with the arm. Less. Right about there. Okay. Cool. And there we go. I'm going to move this out of the way here. Okay, looks like we just went over 2 hours just a little bit. Could have been worse. Usually painting 2 people is more time consuming, of course, because you're painting 2 bodies instead of 1. If I'm doing 2 people, it's usually 2 hours per person, so did it in half the time and got the picture. I'll usually shoot 30 or 40 pictures and refine it and tweak it and play with the posing a little bit, but you know, that's the basic setup, is these 3 different panels, or it could be an LED light or whatever it is to create that separation, rim lighting on the subject, and then the hot light on a dimmer that gives it that nice warm light on the hair, and in this case creating our little distant sun peering through the nebula. And what else do I do on the photography? That's all I can think of. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, have an excellent Thanksgiving next week, and stay safe. Hopefully this pandemic will be over soon and we can get people coming into the studio more regularly and traveling and all of that, and get life back to normal. So love and blessings, and I'll see you on the next podcast. Okay.